Morning light slipped through the cream curtains and settled gently on the framed wedding photo by the wall. In it, Daniel smiled with a confidence that came from hard work and certainty, while his wife, Amara, leaned into him, radiant and calm. The house carried that same calm every morning. The kettle whistled softly. Plates clinked. The day always began without noise, without tension, as though peace itself had learned their routine and decided to stay. Daniel believed deeply in order, in providing, in waking up every day to do right by the life he had built. Amara moved through the kitchen with effortless grace, her wrapper tied neatly, her hair pulled back as she hummed an old tune. She had always been admired for her beauty, but Daniel loved her more for her gentleness. She remembered birthdays, checked on neighbors, prayed quietly at night. When she smiled at him across the small dining table, it felt like a reward for every sacrifice he made. "You'll be late today?" she asked, setting his tea down carefully. Daniel nodded. "Meeting ran over yesterday. Today might be the same." She reached for his hand, squeezing lightly. "Drive safely." Their mornings followed a rhythm that felt unbreakable. Daniel read the headlines on his phone. Amara reminded him to eat properly, and they shared soft laughter over nothing in particular. On the wall opposite the table hung photos of vacations, birthdays, and quiet Sundays. There was no picture of chaos there, no hint of anything broken. When Daniel stood to leave, he kissed Amara's forehead the way he always did, slow and familiar. Trust lived in that gesture. He picked up his briefcase and headed for the door, his mind already shifting to work. Outside, the gate creaked open smoothly before Daniel even touched it. Musa, the gateman, stood straight as always, one hand on the metal, the other resting respectfully by his side. He was a quiet man, modest, with eyes that avoided more than they sought. Daniel appreciated him for that. In a world where noise traveled faster than sense, Musa's silence felt like loyalty. "Good morning, sir," Musa said, voice low. "Good morning," Daniel replied. "Have a good day." Musa nodded, opening the gate wider, never lingering. Daniel drove off with the comfort of routine wrapped around him. Behind him, the gate closed with a final clang, sealing the house back into its private calm. Amara watched the car disappear before turning back inside. The house felt larger when Daniel left, but she was used to that feeling. She moved through the rooms, tidying, opening windows, letting the air circulate. The clock ticked steadily, marking time in a way that felt almost deliberate. Everything was where it should be, yet something in the stillness seemed to listen. Later in the morning, Amara stood before the mirror longer than usual. She changed her blouse twice, adjusting the fit, smoothing invisible creases. It wasn't vanity, she told herself. Everyone liked to look good. She applied a touch of lip gloss, then wiped some off, then reapplied it again. When she stepped back, she studied her reflection as though expecting it to speak. Outside, the sound of the gate opening echoed faintly, followed by footsteps. Musa was doing his rounds, checking the perimeter like he always did. From the kitchen window, Amara could see him clearly. He moved slowly, carefully, as though every action required permission. She watched without thinking, her gaze resting on him longer than necessary. Musa glanced up just once and their eyes met. It was brief, barely a moment, but something passed between them that didn't belong to routine. Musa quickly looked away, pretending to adjust the latch. Amara turned from the window, her heart beating faster than she expected. She told herself it meant nothing. People looked at each other all the time. By midday, a neighbor stopped by briefly to borrow sugar. Amara chatted easily, laughing, playing her part well. From the outside, nothing about her seemed out of place. She was polite, warm, composed. When the neighbor left, Amara leaned against the door for a moment longer than necessary, exhaling slowly. The house felt too quiet again. She checked her phone, scrolled aimlessly, then placed it face down on the counter. Outside, Musa's cough broke the silence. Amara flinched, then smiled at herself for being jumpy. The afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across the compound. Amara watered the plants near the gate, a task she usually finished quickly. Today, she lingered. Musa stood a few steps away, respectful distance maintained. "The roses are doing well," he said softly, more observation than conversation. Amara nodded. "They like attention," she replied. The words felt heavier than they should have. She straightened up, dusted her hands, and walked back inside without another glance. Musa remained where he was, staring at the ground, jaw tight. When evening approached, Amara prepared dinner early, setting the table with extra care. She checked the time repeatedly, knowing Daniel wouldn't be home for hours. The smell of stew filled the house, comforting and familiar. She told herself this was the life she wanted, the life she had chosen. Yet her thoughts drifted back to the gate, to the brief meeting of eyes, to the strange tension that had no name yet refused to leave. She shook her head, as though to scatter the thoughts physically. Daniel returned late, tired but content. Amara welcomed him with warmth, serving his food, listening as he spoke about work. She laughed at the right moments, nodded at the right places. Daniel noticed nothing unusual. To him, she was still the woman he trusted with his life. When they retired for the night, the house settled once more into its familiar silence. Outside, the gate stood closed, Musa's small security room dark and still. Yet in the quiet, something subtle had shifted, unseen, unnamed, waiting patiently within the walls they all believed were safe. The days that followed settled into a pattern that looked normal from a distance but felt strained beneath the surface. Amara woke each morning with the same routine, yet her thoughts no longer moved in straight lines. She caught herself listening for sounds she never noticed before: footsteps outside, the scrape of the gate, the low murmur of Musa's voice when he spoke to delivery men or neighbors. Daniel remained unaware, wrapped in meetings and deadlines, trusting the world he left behind each morning. Amara began dressing differently when she knew she would be alone. It wasn't dramatic at first, just small changes she justified easily. A fitted dress instead of a loose wrapper, perfume on a weekday afternoon. She told herself it was for her own confidence, for the mirror, for the person she used to be before marriage made everything predictable. Yet each time she passed the gate, she felt an awareness sharpen inside her, as though she was stepping into a space where eyes might follow. Musa noticed the changes even though he pretended not to. He stood straighter when she passed, cleared his throat more often, avoided meeting her gaze too directly. He had always respected boundaries, always known his place. But respect did not silence thoughts, and discipline did not erase curiosity. He told himself that he was imagining things, that Madame was simply being kind as she always was. Still, when she greeted him, her voice seemed warmer, slower, as if every word carried an extra weight. One afternoon, Amara lingered near the gate longer than necessary. She pretended to examine a plant pot, brushing dirt from its rim. Musa stood nearby, uncertain whether to move or stay. "The sun is strong today," she said casually. Musa nodded. "Yes, madam, very strong." Their conversation should have ended there, but silence stretched between them, thick and awkward. Amara straightened, dusting her hands again. "You work hard," she added. Musa looked up, surprised. "Thank you, madam." Gratitude flickered in his eyes, mixed with something else he did not dare name. That night, Daniel returned home exhausted. Amara listened as he spoke, but her mind drifted. She responded late to questions, forcing smiles where they once came naturally. Daniel noticed the delay but dismissed it as fatigue. Marriage taught him that moods shifted without reason sometimes. He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You okay?" he asked. Amara nodded quickly. "Just tired." The lie slid out smoothly, practiced already. Over the next week, small signs began to surface. A neighbor noticed Musa spending more time near the house, even when there was nothing obvious to guard. Another commented jokingly that Amara was always looking elegant, as though she were expecting visitors. Amara laughed it off, but each remark tightened the knot in her chest. She became more careful, checking corners before stepping outside, lowering her voice when speaking near the gate. Secrecy crept into her movements without announcing itself. The first phone call happened by accident. Amara had stepped outside to take air when her phone rang. She answered without checking the caller, speaking softly. Musa heard only fragments, laughter cut short, a sudden hush when she realized he was nearby. She turned away, walking toward the back of the compound as though pulled by instinct. Musa stood frozen, the sound of her voice echoing in his head long after she disappeared. Later that evening, Musa sat alone in his small room, staring at the wall. He thought of his village, of the values he was raised with, of the respect owed to another man's home. He told himself to stop thinking, to focus on his duty. Yet images replayed without permission, Amara's smile, the way her eyes lingered before looking away. He felt ashamed for noticing, ashamed for wanting to notice again. The next encounter was quieter but heavier. Amara brought Musa a plate of food in the afternoon, something she had never done before. "Daniel won't be home early," she said, as though explaining herself. Musa accepted the plate with both hands, murmuring thanks. Their fingers brushed briefly, a simple accident that sent a shock through them both. Amara withdrew quickly, heart racing. Musa lowered his head, staring at the food without appetite. That night, Amara barely slept. She turned from side to side, listening to Daniel's steady breathing. Guilt pressed against her chest, but beneath it stirred a dangerous excitement she refused to name. She told herself she was still in control, that nothing had happened. Yet the boundary she once guarded without thought now felt thin, almost transparent. The whispers started quietly. A neighbor mentioned seeing Amara near the gate often. A friend teased her about glowing like a newlywed again. Each comment felt like a warning bell. Amara smiled through them, but fear settled deeper. She began deleting messages immediately, locking her phone obsessively, positioning herself carefully in every space. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Amara and Musa found themselves alone near the gate again. The compound was quiet, the air heavy with unspoken words. Musa spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "Madam, people talk." Amara looked at him, eyes sharp. "Let them," she replied softly. The words hung between them, dangerous and inviting at once. Musa swallowed, understanding the risk, feeling the pull. Inside the house, Daniel worked late, unaware that something fragile was forming within the walls he trusted. Outside, the gate stood as it always had, silent witness to a secret slowly taking shape, growing bolder with every passing day. The day it happened did not announce itself with thunder or warning. It arrived quietly, disguised as another ordinary afternoon. Daniel boarded his flight early that morning with a clear plan in mind. The meeting was supposed to stretch into the evening, followed by dinner with clients. He had kissed Amara goodbye before dawn, promising to call later. She smiled sleepily, pulling the blanket closer as he left, certain the house would belong to her alone for hours. By noon, everything had changed. The meeting ended abruptly after a disagreement between partners. Daniel packed his laptop with irritation still humming in his chest. He checked his watch, calculating the unexpected gift of time. Home sounded better than forced politeness over dinner. He texted Amara to tell her he was returning early, then frowned when the message showed unread. He shrugged it off, assuming her phone was elsewhere, and ordered a ride. The drive home felt unusually long. Daniel stared out the window, replaying the argument in his head, already planning how to explain it to Amara. He imagined her calm voice, her steady presence grounding him. When the car stopped in front of the house, the gate opened slowly. Musa stood there, eyes widening for a fraction of a second before he masked his surprise. "Good afternoon, sir," he said quickly. Daniel nodded, distracted. "Afternoon." The gate closed behind him with a heavier clang than usual. As Daniel walked toward the door, something felt off. The house was louder than it should have been. Not noise exactly, but movement. A muffled sound, like laughter cut short. He paused, briefcase still in hand. Perhaps the television was on. He stepped inside. Shoes by the door caught his eye first. They were not his. They were not Amara's either. His breath slowed as his mind searched for explanations that refused to fit. He moved deeper into the house, each step deliberate. Voices drifted from the living room, low and hurried. One of them was Amara's. The other tightened something in his chest before his brain could fully identify it. Daniel stood still, the world narrowing to the sound of his own heartbeat. He told himself he was imagining things, that exhaustion was playing tricks on him. Then he heard his name spoken in a whisper that did not sound afraid enough. Daniel pushed the door open. Time seemed to stretch and thin all at once. The room froze in a tableau he would replay for the rest of his life. Amara stood near the couch, her hair slightly undone, her dress rumpled. Musa was there too, eyes wide, body stiff, guilt written across his face before his mouth could form words. For a moment, no one moved. Silence pressed in so hard it felt physical. Daniel's briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The sound broke the spell. Amara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Daniel," she whispered, as though saying his name softly might soften the reality before them. Musa dropped to his knees instinctively, his body reacting before his mind caught up. "Sir, please," he said, voice shaking. Daniel did not speak. He could not. His eyes moved slowly from one face to the other, taking in details he never wanted to know. The smell of his home felt different now, contaminated by something sharp and bitter. He felt heat rise behind his eyes, then drain away, leaving a cold clarity that frightened him more than rage would have. "What is this?" he finally asked, his voice sounding distant, unfamiliar even to himself. Amara stepped forward, tears spilling freely now. "It's not what you think," she said quickly, words tumbling over each other. "Please just listen." Daniel laughed once, a short, broken sound. "Then tell me what I should think," he replied. Musa bowed his head, pressing his palms together. "Sir, it is my fault," he said, desperation thick in his tone. "I disrespected you. I disrespected your home." Daniel turned toward him slowly. The sight of Musa on his knees, the same man he trusted to guard his gate, ignited something sharp in his chest. "Get up," Daniel said quietly. Musa hesitated, then stood, trembling. Amara reached for Daniel's arm, but he stepped back as though burned. The rejection hurt more than any slap could have. "Daniel, please," she sobbed. "I was lonely. You were always busy. I didn't plan this." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Lonely," he repeated. "In this house? In this life?" His voice rose despite his effort to control it. "With everything I give you?" The room felt smaller with every word. Daniel paced, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything that would release the pressure building inside him. Instead, he forced himself to breathe. "How long?" he asked, stopping abruptly. The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Amara looked at the floor. Musa swallowed hard. "Sir," he began, but Daniel cut him off. "I asked her." Amara lifted her head, eyes red and swollen. "It didn't start like this," she said softly. "It was just talking. Then, I don't know." Her voice broke completely. Daniel closed his eyes, the images forming without mercy. He opened them again, decision settling over him like a cold blanket. "Get your things," he said to Musa, voice steady now. Musa nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He hurried out of the room, shame bending his back. Daniel watched him go, then turned to Amara. She stood rooted, as though afraid any movement might make the moment permanent. "Daniel, please don't do this," she cried. "We can fix it." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, searching for the woman he thought he knew. What he saw instead was someone else entirely, someone capable of choosing this. "Some things don't break," he said quietly. "They shatter." When Musa left the compound, the gate closed behind him with finality. Daniel stood in the living room, surrounded by the ruins of his trust. Amara sank to the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel did not comfort her. He did not shout. He simply stood there, absorbing the truth in full, knowing that whatever came next, nothing would ever return to what it had been. The silence that followed Musa's departure was heavier than any argument could have been. It pressed into every corner of the house, settling on the furniture, clinging to the walls that had once echoed with laughter. Amara remained on the couch, her sobs uneven and raw, while Daniel stood near the center of the room, hands clenched at his sides, staring at nothing in particular. The anger he expected to explode inside him refused to come. What rose instead was something colder, steadier, and far more dangerous. Amara finally lifted her head, her eyes swollen and red. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Say something, please." Daniel turned slowly, as if remembering she was there. He looked at her the way one might look at a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. "That I understand? That this makes sense?" His tone was calm, but every word landed like a blow. She stood up, her knees shaking, and took a tentative step toward him. "I made a mistake," she said. "A terrible one, but it doesn't erase everything we've built." Daniel laughed again, bitter this time. "Built?" he echoed. "You don't destroy a house from inside and still call it a mistake." He walked past her, moving toward the window, needing space to breathe. Outside, the compound looked the same, indifferent to the chaos it had witnessed. Amara followed him, desperation giving her courage. "You were never around," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I was alone here day after day." He listened. He noticed me. The moment the words left her mouth, she seemed to realize their weight. Daniel turned sharply. "So you rewarded attention with betrayal?" he asked. "You had a choice, Amara. Every single day you had a choice." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I didn't plan to hurt you," she said. "I never thought it would go this far." Daniel's voice rose for the first time. "But it did," he snapped. "And you didn't stop it. You let it grow right here under this roof." He gestured around the room, his voice trembling now despite his effort. "Do you know what that feels like?" She reached for him again, grabbing his arm. He froze, muscles tense, then gently but firmly pulled away. "Don't," he said quietly. The single word carried more rejection than shouting ever could. Amara collapsed back onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. "I'll do anything," she sobbed. "Anything to fix this." Daniel sat across from her, exhaustion finally seeping into his bones. "Some things can't be fixed," he said. "They can only be faced." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "Tell me everything," he added. "No lies, no excuses." The demand was steady, final. Amara hesitated, then began to speak. She talked about loneliness, about harmless conversations that slowly crossed lines, about moments she should have stopped but didn't. Each word felt like another cut, but Daniel listened without interruption. When she finished, the room felt emptier than before. Daniel leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You didn't just betray me," he said. "You betrayed who we said we were." A knock sounded faintly at the gate, startling them both. Daniel stood immediately, tension flaring again. He went to the door, opening it to find Musa standing there, eyes red, hands shaking. He held a small bag. "Sir," Musa said, voice barely audible. "I forgot this." Daniel stared at him, the sight reigniting his anger. "You shouldn't have come back," he said coldly. Musa dropped to his knees again, tears spilling freely now. "Please forgive me," he begged. "I ruined everything. I accept any punishment." Daniel looked down at him, the power dynamic painfully clear. For a brief moment, rage surged, urging him toward violence, toward revenge that would feel justified. Instead, he stepped back. "Get up," he said again, firmer this time. Musa obeyed, trembling. "There is nothing you can do here," Daniel continued. "Leave. Don't come back. Don't contact us. Ever." Musa nodded rapidly, clutching his bag. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He backed away, shame bending his posture, then turned and disappeared through the gate. Daniel closed it himself this time, the sound echoing like a verdict. When he returned inside, Amara looked at him with a fragile hope that made his chest ache. "What now?" she asked softly. Daniel stood still for a long moment, weighing every possible response. He could shout, he could throw her out, he could walk away and never look back. Each option carried its own pain. "I'm not making any promises," he said finally. "Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation." Amara nodded, tears falling silently now. "I understand," she whispered, though her voice suggested she didn't. Daniel picked up his keys, the familiar jingle sounding foreign in the tense quiet. "I need space," he said. "I need to think without your voice in my head." He paused at the door, not turning back. "Whatever happens next," he added, "will be because of what you chose today." With that, he stepped outside, leaving Amara alone in the house she had helped fracture. While the weight of consequences settled in fully for the first time, Daniel did not drive far. He parked by a quiet roadside, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel as the night pressed in around him. For the first time since opening that door, the weight of everything crashed fully onto his chest. He leaned forward, breathing slowly, forcing himself not to break. Rage had come and gone. What remained was clarity, sharp, painful but undeniable. He did not cry. He simply sat with the truth until it stopped fighting him. What Amara did not know, what no one knew, was that Daniel had not been entirely blind. Weeks before that afternoon, something small had unsettled him. A neighbor's casual joke, a strange tension in the house, a shift in Amara's attention he could not explain. He had said nothing, choosing observation over accusation. Quietly, carefully, he had installed cameras, not out of control or obsession, but out of a need to know whether his doubts were born of fear or fact. When the footage first confirmed his suspicions, Daniel did not confront her. He watched instead, not with satisfaction, not with triumph, but with a growing, aching disappointment. He saw moments of hesitation, moments where Amara could have turned back. He waited, hoping she would. She never did. By the time he boarded that flight, he already knew the truth. His early return was not coincidence. It was a final test he never hoped to see fail. Daniel started the car and drove back, his mind settled. When he entered the house, Amara was exactly where he had left her. Sitting on the couch, eyes hollow, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked up at him with fragile expectation. "You came back," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, setting his keys on the table. "Yes." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Daniel spoke, his voice calm in a way that frightened her more than anger ever could. "I need you to listen," he said. "Not to interrupt, not to defend yourself." Amara nodded quickly. "Anything." "I knew," Daniel continued. The word landed heavily. Amara frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "Knew what?" she asked. Daniel stood, walked to a drawer, and removed a small device. He placed it gently on the table between them. "I knew you were seeing him," he said. "I knew before today." The color drained from Amara's face. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Daniel met her eyes steadily. "I installed cameras weeks ago. I saw everything." Her breath caught sharply, hands flying to her mouth. The room seemed to tilt as the realization sank in. "Then why?" she asked weakly. "Why didn't you stop me?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Because I needed to know if you would stop yourself." The words were not cruel, but they cut deeply. Amara's shoulders slumped as though something inside her finally gave way. "I failed," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "You did." Tears streamed freely now, but they carried a different weight. No longer fear of being caught, but the crushing realization of choice and consequence. "I'm sorry," she said again, softer this time. "I didn't think you would ever forgive me, but I hoped. I don't know." Daniel shook his head gently. "This isn't about forgiveness right now," he said. "It's about honesty, with me and with yourself." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You didn't stumble into this. You walked into it. Amara nodded, shame etched into every line of her face. I did, she admitted, and I hate myself for it. Daniel sat back down, exhaustion returning. I don't hate you, he said quietly, but I don't recognize us anymore. The admission hurt more than anger. Amara reached out instinctively, then stopped herself, hands trembling. After a long silence, Daniel stood again. I'm leaving, he said. Amara looked up sharply. For how long? She asked, hope and fear tangled together. Daniel considered the question. Long enough to remember who I am without this, he replied. She nodded slowly, tears falling without sound. I understand, she said, though her voice broke on the word. Daniel walked toward the bedroom, packed a small bag, and returned. He stopped at the door, turning back one last time. This isn't punishment, he said. It's consequence. For both of us. As the door closed behind him, Amara remained seated. The truth finally settled around her with no room left for denial. The house was quiet again, but it was no longer peaceful. It was honest. Days later, the Gateman's room stood empty. Musa had left the area entirely, leaving behind only a short note delivered through a neighbor. It did not beg for forgiveness. It did not accuse. It simply stated the truth, that he had been wrong, that he accepted the weight of his actions, and that he would carry that shame elsewhere. Daniel stayed away longer than Amara expected. In that time, she faced herself without distraction, without excuses. She stopped blaming loneliness. She stopped blaming distance. What remained was responsibility. Whether Daniel would ever return was uncertain. But what was certain was that the illusion was gone. When Daniel finally came back weeks later, it was not as the same man who had left. He was quieter, steadier, carrying a peace that did not depend on anyone else's choices. He looked at Amara not with anger, not with longing, but with understanding sharpened by pain. I forgive you, he said eventually, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let this define me. The forgiveness stunned her more than any punishment could have. Daniel did not promise reconciliation. He did not promise a future together. What he offered was something rarer. Closure without cruelty, strength without bitterness. As he walked away that final time, Daniel carried no revenge, no hatred, only the hard-earned wisdom that trust is a gift and betrayal is a choice. And sometimes the greatest shock is not rage or revenge, but the quiet dignity of a man who chooses peace over destruction.